the FBI ever been? Tired of looking at your ugly crash course? We're selecting 200 owners to see concrete coatings that are
Okay, looks like we're live, everybody. Welcome to our Prophecy Roundtable on technocracy, transhumanism, artificial intelligence, mark of the beast technology. If you have questions tonight, if you would put them in all caps, do a question in all caps, and then your question. We'll try to get some of those. We do have people moderating from on our various platforms. We're streaming this on Britt's YouTube channel, End Time Bible Prophecy. It's on Fellowship Bible Chapel YouTube channel. Then it's on my, I think, Telegram, X, Fellowship Bible Chapel Facebook, and Rumble, Real FBC. So if you want to catch other platforms and that type of thing, again, welcome tonight. Welcome our guests, co-hosts, I would call them at this point, Patrick Wood, Scott Townsend, Britt Gillette, and Pete Garcia, and I'm John Haller. So, Patrick, I want to start off with you. So, by the way, folks, if you, I hope we make this look easy, but this is very difficult because there is a tremendous amount of things going on in this space, and I talk a lot about other topics of Bible prophecy. I know Britt and Pete and others do, even Patrick. And it's very, very difficult at this point to keep up. It is like a tsunami that's washing over us in so many directions. So, Patrick, I was researching something on Babylon, and I want to get your take, and then we'll launch into the rest of the discussion tonight. So this is an article from... It just popped up in my feed. It's from 1961. The person has a schematic. Maybe I can do a share screen here. Let's see. Now I'm missing my let's see, share screen. And I'm probably going to have trouble tonight because I updated my operating system yesterday. And hang on a second here. I have to move my camera because I can't see my thing. Okay, here we go. So it comes from a thing called Work Body Leisure. I'm not even going to try the name of the guy that did this. But it says in 1961, Constant Nieuwenhuis, or whatever his name is, gave a lecture on New Babylon at the Technical University. And in there, he said this. By the way, you see the schematic there in the middle of the page, this kind of city that I think that he envisioned and how it would look. And he said this: New Babylon wants to be the environment in which we could live, should live, would want to live, if the factors to prevent it are overcome. The design is therefore based on the complete automation of production on an acommercial, i.e. on a needs-based distribution of foodstuffs and consumer goods from the comprehensive exploitation of the earth, a total urbanization. By robotizing labor, the population has free disposal of its time. The interior of New Babylon is focused on a free and creative way of life. Any comment on that, Patrick?
Wow. Well, I've never seen this before. I'd like to examine it in total, but I'll tell you what, this is pure technocracy from the 1930s. Totally. Totally. That's exactly what they specified.
Yeah, and I don't have the video teed up, but if any of you are interested, and I'm not saying that this is Babylon, but I'm just saying is when you look at the videos that are being put up about Neom that's being built in Saudi Arabia. Now they've scaled it back, but the videos, I think there's a YouTube channel called Giga Projects, and you can find some of the recent updates on Babylon, or on, I'm sorry, not Babylon, Neom there. But it looks very much like this pickup sticks drawing in the middle of the page. It's this vertical city, and it seems to have a dystopian quality to it. And by the way, some of the architects of NEOM have stated, I have the videos in my archive, that this is our Babylon. That's the terminology that they use. So, Patrick, thanks for that. So, Britt, Scott, Pete, weigh in if you have any comments on this.
Well, I think it's been shared before, but it bears repeating that we are, what has been underground for so long. Patrick, you've always been, you're the guy that really taught me about technocracy. So thank you for that. But it's like it's emerging and it's breaking through, the visibility mode right now. And there's no stopping what is coming right now. And it just begs the question, how did they do that? They did so many things behind the curtains, and the elites and all the other technical people that were involved in getting the architecture and all the investment being made for these systems. And it reminds me of, I think it was Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum a couple of years ago, when he was talking about what are the next big problems that, impede basically the one world system. And he said governance. And I remember thinking to myself, that's odd. I would have thought something else, would have been the biggest impediment to this stuff. But I think he was, in retrospect, I understand it exactly as that. The government or the governance framework to control is what he was referring to, and the impediments of free market economies. And one of the criticisms of NEOM and other projects that we see like this, 15-minute cities, is this idea of essentially, virtually enslaving people in smaller world domains, if you will. And just wait when we have another revisit of virtual reality where you plug into goggles and you never escape, you never come back to reality after that. It's hard to imagine how fast it's coming and how the groundwork must have been carefully laid brick by brick in order to get to this point where the emergence of our awareness of technocracy at the public level has just sprung out of nowhere. And the first taste I really had of this, John, was when Elon and his buddies were putting AI into our governmental systems. That was the first real world wake-up call that I got about the nearness of the hour where the beast system is actually being unleashed right now, right in front of our eyes. And so I'm looking a lot more towards narrative control, where they're saying this is for our benefit, this is what we need. But underneath it, of course, is all the nasty stuff that we know is coming. So it's just shocking.
I think if the question there is, when are we freed of the tyranny of labor? We got to remember that the world is always at odds against God's design, and God gave man labor before he fell. Adam was working in the garden before he fell. He was to name the animals. He was to tend to the things of the garden. We don't know how big the garden was, but that was supposed to be for his benefit. And we know that after the fall, that it obviously became much, much harder, much more difficult. And so, but here is man trying to, undo all the things that God did from the beginning. He wants to be free of labor. He doesn't want to have to work. In order to do that, he's going to have to trade his freedom and his liberty for slavery, essentially, once he gets brought into the system. Other than that, there's the desire to break the norm of the family unit, to confuse man's understanding of gender, of just the nature of reality itself, where man came from. So this is just another, in my opinion, another long line of things that Satan is trying to undo that God did from the beginning. God divided man at Babel, the Tower of Babel. That's something God did. And here we are with, I guess next year, the AirPods that come out, and we were talking about that earlier, about translating languages automatically. And so we're overcoming or undoing the judgment from Babel. So this is right along those same lines.
The reversal of the judgment at Babel.
Mhm.
I think that's what we're seeing. Britt?
Yeah, I agree with that. That's exactly what we're seeing with, the calls for global governance. And we're seeing, again, these translation softwares, things like Google Meet, where it's not only just translating what you say into another language, but it's heard in real time. It's heard in your tone and your voice and your cadence. Everything about it is seamless. And so we're seeing that language barrier erased. And guys, this is just pointing to, I believe the Tower of Babel is more than just history. It's a prophecy of things to come, because God said, look at what they're doing now. Nothing will be impossible for them.
Yeah.
And so this is where we're headed. This is where God was telling us that this is where human beings would push toward. And we're seeing it in our day and time.
Yeah. I don't really even know where to go next. I think that one thing that we've expressed concerns about here is, well, let's talk about this. Where are we on the scale of development of AI, artificial generative intelligence, super intelligence? Is it coming? Is it overblown? Is it overhyped? And is it maybe a distraction from the real problem? So let's just kind of go around the horn and see what everybody thinks about that. And let Scott, let's let you start, and then we'll move on through the list here.
Okay. So I think let's just remember timeline for a second. Revelation 13, it's the false prophet that begins to, I call him the enforcer of the mark of the beast. And we know that AI is needed to be able to control the policies and the decisions and the intel and gathering of information worldwide to give the Antichrist false omniscience and omnipresence and things like that. It's a counterfeit all the way. But remember the timing. These things are talked about at the midway point of the tribulation. And if you think about how far, we're at least 3.5 years away from that. And so when you hear things like the AI folks saying that AI competency, I'm not going to call it intelligence, as you know, but their competency is doubling every 4 months right now. That is basically the logarithmic curve that Britt keeps educating us about all the time. And I have to tell you from a anecdotal, real world perspective, because I use AI coding assistants, I could tell you that the productivity and the results that I'm getting is just, it's staggering how far it has come. And I'm using agentic frameworks now and getting real world hands-on experience with agents and what they do and how they work, both professionally and just out of interest as a tech guy. And what they're saying has just been the maturing cycle of what they do. It seems like every week or two, they're leapfrogging each other again. And it's true. It is hard to keep pace with the competency, and I would say the ability for it to be coherent in its thinking. And by thinking, I'm using air quotes, but it's I think what I'm saying is that if you think about when the enforcement action of the mark is going to occur, as at least 3.5 years away, then we know that we are right on the trajectory of it. In fact, I think most of the experts believe we are ahead of where they thought these things would be. I remember 1950 or 2050s, 2060s, they were thinking of this stuff, but I think we're almost there. And I don't care what the media says or what label they put on it. It is not artificial general intelligence or super intelligence as an intelligence, as a thinking thing. This is a sophisticated form of autocomplete, but it's getting so good now that it's blurring those lines of distinctiveness now. So I think a lot of it's already here, John. I think the major infrastructure parts are what are being built now. All those data centers is what, and think about Elon's march towards his massive data centers, and he's not the only one. So that infrastructure will be completed in the next, year. But certainly, when those machines come online, the competency, performance, the ability for these AI systems to support the one world system, that's happening right now. And you don't need a PhD to see, that we're right on that path. In fact, I think we're ahead of the path of where these things are headed.
Yeah, Britt, I would I'll go to Britt, then we'll go to Patrick.
Okay.
But for example, this was the headline in the Columbus Dispatch local newspaper yesterday about Meta, CEO of Meta, I guess that's Mark Zuckerberg, saying that this would be the highest capacity data center in the world, that they're building 15 minutes from my house. And that's on top of the billions of dollars that they've already spent. It's called a supercluster called Hyperion that will be able to scale up to 5 gigawatts over several years. So, Patrick, well, did I say Britt? We're going to go to Britt first for his comments.
Okay, well, I would divide this into two different sections. So you mentioned the data centers. I think that we're seeing overbuild from a investment standpoint. There's a lot of malinvestment going into the overbuilding of these and NVIDIA chips, similar to what we saw in the dot-com boom, where we saw, well, Cisco is going to rule the world of the internet. The internet's going to be so transformative. All this fiber optic cable was laid, and then the companies that did it, for the most part, went out of business. And the internet was just as transformative as everyone said, but it didn't come instantaneously at that time. I think we're seeing something very similar with AI. It's been, almost 4 years since ChatGPT made it into all the mainstream corporate media stories, and people were talking about how it was going to take everyone's job. And then here we are today, and people are looking, saying, well, where is this promised change? But when you have exponential growth in the beginning, it appears that nothing's happening. And then it happens all at once. So I would expect that we're going to see the same thing here, as some of this malinvestments get washed out of the system. New companies are created, new applications are created, and we're going to see a lot of the promise of this technology come to fruition. We're going to see that the hype is not overblown for the most part, but we're still in the early moments of this, I believe, in the AI revolution. And so we have yet to see what's really coming.
Yeah, here's a chart of exponential growth. And this is an article from 5 years ago that I just found tonight. But it's interesting, he uses the terminology that a lot of us use, because it says gradually, then suddenly. That's how exponential growth can ruin your day, undo your family, evaporate your economy, destroy your climate, crush an empire, and destabilize a planet. Now, he's bought into climate change. But the point is, we live at this time of exponential growth. Patrick,
Sure.
Your thoughts?
Well, when, let's see, it was about a month after Trump was, after the inauguration, I made a prediction that, calculation, it wasn't a prediction. I made a calculation based on the exponential growth of AI at that point. It was basically 4.5 months per cycle to double. And the math works out, by the time Trump gets out of office, using his first month as the baseline, AI would increase by a multiple of at least 15 to 16,000 times in just 4 years. This is, and that doesn't take into account that the cycle might shorten or maybe would lengthen. But nevertheless, this is the established cycle at this point. It's about 4.5 months where everything doubles. So this is exponential growth. This is the face of it. And at this point, it's being overhyped. It's been being oversold for sure, but it's still an oxymoron. It will always be an oxymoron because there's no such thing as artificial intelligence. It's a machine. It's not human in any way. However, you're going to see that they will claim at some point that it's becoming sentient, and people will believe that, and they'll think, oh, what we have now is basically AI God. And so off to the races they'll be. This is a major deception for the human race. And I probably should talk a little bit about Ephesians 6 at this point, because, I believe the Bible very strongly. And Ephesians 6 tells us about the God of this world, and the one that's in charge of the world system. And Ephesians 6:12 says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against the spiritual wickedness in high places." Now, and then it goes on to talk about the Christians' spiritual armor to defeat this. But what we're dealing with here is a massive deception being executed on the whole world. And we're not hardly into it at this point, but it'll at some point it's going to turn into a delusion, not a deception now, but then it'll turn into a hardened delusion where people basically are going to lose their mind at some point, and they'll just drift off into a psychotic state. We see this even happening right now with some stories about AI psychosis induced by AI. So anyway, that kind of answers the question. Yes, is it exponential? It really is. Is there charlatans in it? Yes, there really certainly are. Do they have evil intent for the human race? Yes, they do. There's no doubt about it. So we watch the parade go by, and we have to remember, I think, that God is permitting this as it goes along. This is not out of his control, because Satan has always been the god of this world. That's his playground. The system of the world, the cosmos, the way that's organized, etc. However, God has kept Satan on a short leash for many millennia probably. But at this point, it appears to me that God is loosening his grip on Satan to say, okay, I'm going to give you a little more rope, just a little more rope, and let's see what you do with it. And this is his expression to get ready for that time in history when this is going to happen, when the rapture happens and the tribulation starts. The devil has to be ready for that. And I think God is being this is twisted, I realize, but God is a fair God. He's going to give Satan everything he needs to do his job, and then he's going to crush him like a flea, like an ant in the end of it. But at this point, we can see evil is rising all over the world in an exponential fashion.
So I'm going to go to Pete, but I want to follow up with Patrick for just a moment. So I'll repeat the example that we've used in the past of exponential growth, that as things double and then double again and then double again. So it's baseball playoffs, so we can use the example of let's say Yankee Stadium sealed up watertight, take an eyedropper out to second base and drop 1 drop of water, then a minute later drop 2 drops of water, then a minute later 4 drops, then 8, then 16. and on. And the question is, how long does it take Yankee Stadium to fill up all the way with water? And the answer is about 50 minutes. That's very difficult for us to grasp how quick, but that's how exponential growth happens. It's very quick, and it overwhelms you. And by the way, remember that if somebody's chained to a chair or a seat at the top of the stadium, 1 minute before they drown, the stadium is only half full because it doubles in that last minute. So, and I think this is the way a lot of the things we see in Bible prophecy are going to go. Patrick, I want to follow up. Somebody asked a question in the chat. You said 15 to 16,000 times. Give us some kind of points of reference. Like what is it that's growing 15 to 16,000 times?
Okay, take the state of AI when Trump took office. Make that your baseline. Forget any other day.
Less than 10 months ago.
Yeah, the AI was pretty powerful even then. I think we were into a GPT-4, I think, at that point. So it was pretty powerful, but taking it from that point forward, doubling every 4.5 months. 4.5 months. That basically that's three doubles a year, and we have 4 years to go from that point forward. 4 years. Each year has 4 quarters, right?
Right.
And so you do the math on that. Anybody can do the math. Just figure out how many times it'll double in 4 years, and there you go. You'll find you find maybe the low end might be around 12,000. The high end might be as much as 16,000 times. That's a lot of growth. And will ASI be here by that time? It almost is certain at this point.
You mean by the end of the Trump administration?
Exactly.
Okay. And so, Pete, I'll give you your thoughts, and then I want to go into a practical thing, what you're seeing in your experience around. So, Pete, maybe you can touch on that at the end of your comments.
Yeah, well, I just remember back in 2015, I was in command, and I was part of an aviation brigade in a battalion, and we had mixed aircraft in there, so we had Blackhawks, Chinooks, and Apaches, and 58 Deltas, and they were just beginning to bring in the drones to fly that were going to be part of the new CAV squadron. So they were getting rid of the OH-58s, and they were going to bring in drones, but this was all still pretty new. And we had this thing called manned-unmanned teaming. So you would have an Apache pilot flying an H-64, and then they would be paired up with a Reaper or one of the other kind of larger drones doing missions together. And that was all cutting edge then. I mean, we have way blown past that, and that's only been 10 years ago. We had a new digital supply system, logistics system that came out called Geek. We call it Geeks Army. It was Geeks A, but it's the general or global combat support system, Army. And it was just a digital system, but it had no artificial intelligence in it. And now, as of July, I mean, Palantir has got a $10 billion contract to do all of the data fusion and stuff within the U.S. military. And part of that is a company called Vantage, which will eventually replace all the logistics and financial systems. And you could just see how much technology is grown in just that 10 years. It's been, like Britt's talking about, exponential. I mean, who knows? The longer we're here, the more we're going to see this it just going really into every facet of society. And as I mentioned, in a previous conversation we had, this is going to impact people's jobs. This is going to impact people's livelihoods, and they're going to have to come out with some kind of a financial solution for people that are lost their jobs, lost everything. So, but yeah, it's happening. It's happening way faster, and it's happening at such a pace that I think most people are not really aware of it until it impacts them directly.
Mm. Can I follow up on that comment?
Sure.
This is pertains to the military, especially. President Trump just went to the UK recently, last week, and he took with him all of the tech pros from Silicon Valley in the administration. They were all there. Elon Musk, Sam Altman, the whole flock of them went with him to England. They made investments there. They take away contracts, etc. But the most important contract taken at that point was a $1.2 billion contract to Palantir to provide their targeting system to the UK. And you know that's going to be spread to all of NATO at this point. So this software has been tested in Ukraine especially, and they think it's battle hardened and it's ready for action, even to the extent of pushing Russia back to its original borders and then some. That Trump said that exactly. And what's he talking about? Who has that capability? Who is NATO going to invade somehow Ukraine and push everybody else out of the back door? Well, nobody said that, but it appears to me that there's been some slick salesmanship, overhyping, perhaps, maybe overconfidence building around this tool that Palantir thinks it has at this point is very sophisticated. They think apparently this could turn the tide against Russia. Now, I cannot explain it any further than that, but just to say they have something in their hand at this point that's causing the national leaders like King Charles and Donald Trump and the leaders of Europe to rethink this whole business of warfare. This is a scary thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, what's the status of the process where the U.S. was going to start supplying Tomahawk missiles? I know that was on offer. And to your point, Patrick, if they provide the weapon payload, the package for it, and then you've got AI targeting, such as you've suggested here, that would change a lot of things. Because even with those little, let's call them $2,000 drones, it is pretty impressive what Ukraine can do just with those little guys. And it's to know that they can command and control a battery of Tomahawks is unbelievable. And remember what Tomahawks just did with Iran and demolishing. They had a contributory role. It wasn't just those big $30,000 or 30,000 pound bombs that went deep underground.
The GBU 57.
Yeah,
bunker
yeah,
buster.
right, John. But it was, I just call it the big guy.
The big guy.
So, but I mean, just think, it was a battery of those. I can't remember if it was Isfahan, but it was one of the surface level target areas, and they just blanketed that thing with those drones that they did, Tomahawks specifically. And I think those are mobile launch. You can launch them from a sub, from a support ship. And so if they supply Ukraine with this, because everyone's upset with Putin, and he is totally out of control, by the way, then, you could easily see that escalating very quickly.
So I want to go to Britt. I want to talk. So maybe we should move to the use of AI in warfare section. That was one of the things I wanted to talk about. And Britt, I know you've talked a lot about the drones, and I watch a lot of Russian and Ukrainian channels to analyze the war. And the one thing that I think I've picked up most consistently from the Ukrainian channels, and then to build on Patrick's comment about Palantir, because Palantir has been involved in the Ukrainian theater since the beginning with their software. But the one thing that Ukraine has provided to the world is a tremendous database or treasure of battlefield data. What happens on a battlefield when this happens and this happens?
Mm-hmm.
and how
Yeah.
that can be analyzed. And I think that data has really never ever been collected before anywhere like it's being collected in Ukraine. And Britt, I know you've talked a lot about drones. We've got a big drone factory in the process of being built here in the Columbus area by one of the guys who was
Anduril?
Anduril, and the
Palmer
guy was,
Lucky.
what's his name?
Palmer Lucky.
Hey, no, this sounds like a made-up name.
He
Palmer Lucky is a billionaire.
Yeah, he made a couple billion when he sold his VR glasses to Meta.
Yeah, and I wanted also somebody make a note to remind me to get back to the virtual reality thing, because that's sort of rearing its head again too. But Britt, let's go to drones and replicator and that type of thing.
Sure.
What do you have to say?
Well, what we're seeing in Russia, Ukraine is really a real world, real time laboratory for innovation. So similar to World War I, look at where militaries were prior to World War I and afterward. You went in and, the great generals had studied Napoleon and cavalry attacks. Right? And that, the types of weapons that ended up being used weren't even on their radar entering that conflict. And everything had completely changed on the other side. And we're already seeing this going from just the role that drones play in that war. It's really become a drone war. I mean, drones are dominating that war, but particularly in regard to conventional weaponry. And what we're seeing now is we're seeing both sides deploying small swarms of AI-enabled drones that are adapting on the battlefield, that are autonomous and selecting targets, which is something that a number of people have had ethical issues with over the years. But it's war. And in war, you're going to take whatever advantage you can get. And so we're seeing the evolution of these swarms in real time on the battlefield. Now, it's still, I believe, in the early moments and the early innings of this revolution. So right now, most commonly, you're seeing, 3 quadcopters in a swarm. They're trying to move to 25 to 100. But eventually what we're going to see is millions and billions. And we're going to see them manufactured not in Ohio, but in real time on the battlefield. But those technologies are in the future. They're not centuries in the future, but that's what you would expect to see in the latter part of that exponential curve, that all at once moment where people still think, well, I've got another hour before the stadium fills with water. And then everything changes suddenly all at once. I believe that moment's coming when we see molecular manufacturing created. That's going to enable the rapid, cost-effective development of drone swarms at scale. And you would have essentially not quadcopters, but imagine mechanized swarms of bees and locusts just overwhelming a battlefield. So that's what's coming in the future. It's not as far away as everyone thinks. We're seeing almost all the major players are creating what's called biomimetic drones, which are drones that mimic nature. So they're taking God's design that already works so well, and they're mimicking that. They're creating drone fish that look like fish. There's one, drone birds, drone insects, all sorts of drones that just mimic nature. See drone biomimetic people. So we've all seen these robots that do backflips and engage in the martial arts. And so we're going to see this on mass scale as it becomes much more cost effective to do this. And again, from a developer standpoint, you're investing in the software. The hardware is more of an afterthought. You want it to be disposable, and you need to turn around quickly in that innovation process. So you don't want to manufacture a whole bunch of units over the course of 10 or 15 years. You want to, what's created this week will be obsolete in short order. So that's where we're headed, is more of investment into software and not so much in software as far as the defense industry is seeing. And drones are the future for the military. They're the present for
Mhm.
national defense, but it's the future is completely dominated by drones.
Yeah. So this was an article in the Wall Street Journal the other day about some problems in the replicator program. Brett, I know you talked a lot about it, so we have you up. What are your thoughts on how that's going and how that's going to change?
Sure. Yeah, I don't know necessarily what's going on behind the scenes there, but again, the name replicator is not an accident. That's a direct pull from a book titled Engines of Creation that was published back in 1986 by Eric Drexler. He's still around today. He's considered the father of molecular manufacturing and really created a lot of these ideas, put them out in that book. So to me, that is a promise from the U.S. military that's what they're working toward. They're working toward this ability to deploy mass swarms of drone at scale. And they're not alone. China's trying to do the same thing. Russia's trying to do the same thing. Europe's trying to do the same thing. The question is, who is going to get there first? Who's going to have these breakthrough technologies that allow them to circumvent mutually assured destruction? Because once that happens, we have World War III and we have global empire. And I believe at that point, we're in Revelation chapter 6. I don't think we're all that far away from seeing that happen. It's just a matter of what is the timeline for the maturation of these technologies?
Okay. Thoughts of the other guys. And then I want to kind of on the battlefield and technology space and in war. And then I want to move to like the practical effect, if we're seeing any, if you're seeing anything of AI in the employment space, workspace, how things are changing rapidly there. So let's just kind of go around the table. Pete, any thoughts?
I just going back to my original statement about 2015 till today. I mean, we went from just integrating drones into teams to now having the potential for swarms of drones controlled, unmanned or these unmanned system or autonomous systems that can overwhelm enemies in varying degrees, whether air, on the ground, underwater, under the ground, subterranean. I mean, we have all manner of things now. So just looking at the speed in just those 10 years, I would think within the next 5, we would be well into like Armageddon territory at the speed. If everything is going at the same speed that it's been going at with the exponential growth, I think it's going to happen rather rapidly, especially after the rapture.
Yeah. Patrick.
If I were King Charles and I had this new weapon in my portfolio, I would call up Putin, and I say, so I'm just making this up, but I would call Putin up and I would say, Vlad, old boy, we see you right now. We see you when you go to the bathroom, when you go out with your cronies for a glass of vodka. We know who all your friends are. We know where your driver lives, where anybody else in your network. We're tracking all of those people, and especially you, Vlad. And if you don't hang up your shingle, we're going to take you out just like a fly on the wall that's going to get a big slap with a big fly swatter based on our targeting software. We know where you live. We know exactly how you move, etc. And we're going to take you out. We know where all your generals are as well. We're going to cut them off too. And anybody else that needs to be taken out. We know where all your people are, and we're going to surgically remove them from your presence, and then we're going to take you. This type of software at this point, this is exactly what we saw, for instance, in Iran when they took out all those generals all at once. They were tracking them forever. I mean, with Palantir software, you can't hide from this stuff. Apparently, it's not just based on social media, but any other activity, even satellite pictures, drone footages, etc. It apparently has the power to identify all of your networks that you're involved with, how they move left and right, whatever, how they operate. And basically, at this point, probably nobody on Earth can escape this type of surveillance. That's kind of my point. Drones aside, that's the method of execution, if you will. But the targeting, that's what Palantir is perfecting right now, and they've done a whopping job, apparently.
Patrick, while I'm thinking about it, I know you've sort of written the book on technocracy, and Elon Musk's grandfather left Canada under threat of being brought up on charges of treason and fled to South Africa. That's why Elon Musk is from South Africa. So his grandfather was a big technocrat. But recently, Russia had a big gathering of people, I believe, in Moscow, and it was called the Forum of the Future 2050. And a lot of people will say, oh, Putin's, he's against the globalists. Listen, Putin is so deep in this, he's up to his eyeballs in it.
Yes.
And all the usual America hating, Jew hating people like Jeffrey Sachs and others were there, including, surprisingly, Alex Jones was there, George Galloway from the UK. But one guy was there, and I don't know how he fits into this, and maybe you know more, Patrick. That's why I'm asking you. One of the participants in that Forum of the Future, this was in June or July in Moscow, was Elon Musk, Elon Musk's father. Is he part of this technocratic thing?
It certainly appears that way, doesn't it?
Okay. I had never really heard of him. I've heard of his grandfather, and from you talking about it, but I had not really made the connection to his father. So I'm going to go a different direction. But Scott, if you have any comments on this whole warfare and how AI is changing the face of war around the world.
I do. Thank you, John. My mind immediately goes to, what is it going to be like for tribulation saints that are fleeing into unpopulated areas because they know that being in any kind of a metro or small city is going to allow this type of surveillance to be done on them. And just how onerous is that when it's run on a global Starlink system, and it has all the telemetry being fed into an AI that would then go into targeting software, which AI will run. Let's not forget that, you don't have a data center or a call center with 10,000 employees in it pounding away on a keyboard and each having 2 monitors. That's not how this works. That doesn't scale. So it will be going into a series of dedicated systems. And incidentally, let's just remind ourselves that Elon, created 100,000 GPU original system. He doubled it. And now he's planning to double that again. If I recall correctly, that is his current project. So when you talk about the compute capacity that Elon is directly responsible for, and how fast he is in being able to put up these data centers, and you consider what a trap it is. How can you escape this system? And we know it is possible because, the tribulation saints, some will make it all the way through into the right hand of Jesus at the sheep and goat judgments. They will be allowed to enter into the millennial reign. There has to be a remnant of humanity. But thinking about the oppression of the human beings, and when the restrainer is removed, the what I think about, and I wrote an article on Substack called Getting in the Mind of a Tribulation Saint. I probably need to do a revision on that, just because I think it's getting so much clearer how difficult this is going to be for our future brothers and sisters. Okay. And my heart just aches for them. And knowing what we know on this side of the rapture, being watchmen and watchwomen, watching this stuff happening, and it's forming this groundswell, basically, of the oppressive systems of the beast system. And it is just, it's almost, the human toll of all this is almost beyond our ability to fully comprehend how bad it's going to be. But yet God makes a way. And so there's going to be just a terrible time coming. So anyway, it's hard to hear all this and not think immediately of our future brothers and sisters, for sure.
Yeah.
Hey, John.
So go ahead.
If you want to look at the big picture view, what are the militaries of the world focused on right now? It's primarily stealth technologies. It's going to be speed and range. So they're looking at hypersonic technologies. It's the AI, and then plugging the AI into unmanned systems, and then consequently the autonomous systems that will operate, and then directed energy weapons are the big ones. But it just something, I don't know, I think Patrick was talking, and it clicked on, like, if you have all these drones swarming all over the world all the time, constantly surveilling the world and its citizens, anybody that doesn't have that mark is a fair game. Just in the same way that in the Army, back in deployments, we wore uniforms, and the uniforms would have certain things on them, and from the satellites or from the drones, you could tell who was U.S. and who wasn't. And so it seems to me that mark is going to be, in part, used that way as well to distinguish friend from foe.
So, people, well, I've got you up. Maybe I could ask you this question, because I found this to be kind of an interesting article. And some of these things, by the way, I can't keep up with all this stuff. It's just, it's blowing my mind. Israel's now announced they have Iron Beam, but this is a Wall Street Journal exclusive article from a couple weeks ago when Israel attacked the Hamas meeting in Doha, Qatar. And the Wall Street Journal, I think, nailed what happened is that Israel was able to pull off a long-range attack by not entering Saudi Arabian or other foreign country airspace. They went to the Red Sea and launched the attack on Qatar on a very precise thing. I met an individual who was actually landed in Doha on his way to the United States from the Middle East, connecting through Doha just after the attack had taken place. He saw the plumes of smoke. He showed me his ticket to confirm that he had actually been there. But so you're a military guy, Pete. I mean, how is this? The Wall Street Journal said this is a huge game changer. It also highlighted the extent of Israel's military superiority over the rest of the region and its ability to deploy it at vast distances with high accuracy.
Yeah.
Translate that for us.
So going above 18,000 feet, and presumably, I don't know how high up they went beyond that to completely clear their airspace, come back down and target a precision strike with the limited package. You got to think of Gettr as being the porcupine there in that part of the Persian Gulf, because you've got LUD, the air base there. You've got KAOP, which is the Central Aviation Operations Center that controls all of U.S. military aviation throughout the Middle East. And this missile, not only were they able to launch it, clearing the airspace, and then bringing it down precisely on the intended target, or at least that location, but they were also able to make it past all of the layers of air defense that the A2, D2 structures that they had in place there above the airspace above Gettr. So this was an incredible. They were able to either cloak that strike in such a way that the U.S., Qataris, or whoever wouldn't know until it was too late to do anything about it, or even to notify anybody about it, or they didn't know at all until after the fact. And that's a hugely embarrassing uh, position to put the U.S. and then to put the Qataris and everybody else in, because Israel was able to launch this without anybody knowing and without anybody able to do anything about it. So they were able to circumvent hypersonic. Hypersonic is this idea that you fly so fast that by the time it's launched, there's nothing that anybody can do to stop it. And that's what everybody's racing toward to get or to perfect. Yet it doesn't seem that this was hypersonic. It seems that they were using cloaking technology to shield it from the radar, from all the defense systems that we have in place there in Qatar. Again, that's KAOK is controlling all the U.S. Air movements throughout everywhere from like North Africa all the way to Afghanistan. So that's pretty impressive for what they did. And it certainly put everybody on notice. And I'm sure that Netanyahu, when he kind of apologized for the strike, killing the Qatari, it was also kind of like you apologizing to the biggest kid on the block who you knocked out, and your parents make you go up and apologize to him, but everybody saw you knock him out with one punch. And so you do it, but you're like, yeah, everybody knows not to mess with us. That kind of thing.
Okay, I want to follow up, and I want to go you to continue a little bit, Pete, and to Britt, because this is an article that's in the New York Times Monday, and it's talk about the missiles threatening Taiwan, and it goes through the extensive missile outposts that China has put in place with regard to Taiwan. But I also, as I've studied this, I mean, China's built these big barges that, are supposed to be able to build bridges, put a bridge in like a half mile out in the ocean to let tanks and everything come across. And so I'm just like your thoughts, and then Britt, about how does what Israel did in Qatar change the possibilities of a land invasion of Taiwan? Does it not have an impact on it? Does it change it? Does it, if somebody else is able to, like Taiwan or the US is able to figure out how Israel did this and then deploy that in the China-Taiwan theater, everybody thinks for sure there's a war coming. They've been talking about it for years. How's that impact everything, Pete, then Britt?
Okay, so from the big picture view, I always thought that if China was going to go ahead and make a move on Taiwan, it wouldn't be until Russia did something that provoked a shooting war between them and NATO. And while the world is focused on NATO or focused on Europe, then China would go ahead and launch this attack onto Taiwan. Now, Taiwan has obviously a very, I would say technologically speaking, they're probably a little better than China, because most of what was detailed to remember back a year or two ago, they found out a lot of their missiles were filled with water. They're there, they look pretty, they put them on parades, but are they functional? Are the people trained? And I think largely no. They do have a lot of people, they have a lot of soldiers, and they have they're formidable in a traditional sense of the word. But I think technologically speaking, Taiwan would be the little porcupine off their coast that they're really not interested in doing anything with until they are 100% certain that they could take it out. And I don't think China is anywhere near where Israel is technologically speaking, or even in terms of ingenuity and how they're going to do attack. Like, look at what Israel did with the pagers, the walkie-talkies, and other things. It's in targeted strikes. I don't know that China is there. Now, do they have the capacity to do they a lot of damage to Taiwan? Absolutely. I mean, they can launch volley after volley of missiles. But when you look at what is China focused on, like what are they focused on as their military, their priorities? Right now, they're prioritizing speed and range, whereas the U.S. is prioritizing like artificial intelligence, integrating that into all of their systems. We're looking at space weapons. We're looking at stealth technology, both in the air and underwater. I mean, we're so far beyond where China is. China, India, and the UK are all largely still trying to catch up on a lot of ways because of how far atrophied their systems have become. So I don't know if and when China will make their move on Taiwan, but I would bet that it would probably coincide with a further expansion of Russia into a NATO conflict where the world's focus is now, like World War II, it's going to have to be divided between two different theaters, between a Pacific theater and then a European theater. Now the U.S. forces are divided in half. They're trying to increase their odds, but hopefully that answered the question on that with Taiwan.
Well, Pete, I want to just back up and ask you something. Are you suggesting that China may be lying to us?
No, don't get me wrong. They've taken a lot of our technology, reverse engineered it, but they don't have, here's the advantage that the US has and the West has over China. We've had decades, centuries of learning from our mistakes and what works and what systems and the layers and the functions that the strata that goes into making a nation a superpower. They've largely only been a superpower since about the 1990s, or maybe even the end of the 1990s. So they are, in my estimation, in terms of a defense side, they're paper tiger. They have a ton of soldiers. They have a ton of soldiers, and they could do massive amounts of damage on the ground in their proximity within China and in the nations immediately surrounding China. But they don't have they don't have the projection force that they have a huge Navy. I think their Navy's bigger than ours, but could it ship, millions of soldiers against Taiwan or against Japan or anybody else? I would say they're challenged logistically because they don't have that same level of infrastructure that we've built up over the decades, so I would say no. Or okay. Yeah, they are lying, but know that they are not as big a threat to us and to really anybody outside of their immediate borders. Now, can they plant terror cells and sleeper cells and do all kind of, treasonous types of, things with stealing proprietary information and technologies? Yes, they can do that. They just don't have that infrastructure. And everybody's so terrified of Xi Jinping, and he's held so much power so close to him for so long. He's removed all his rivals. There's really no other competent person ready to take the reins behind him that we know of. But yeah, so I don't know that their attack on Taiwan would come. I wouldn't look for an attack on Taiwan unless it was the Russia expanding into some further NATO conflict that divides the world's attention.
Okay, so Britt, I want to go to you and get your thoughts on this, and then I have a couple comments, and then I want to get back to the AI stuff. But I think this is all, like everything else in the world, this is really interconnected.
Sure. Yeah. Whether or not they have the capabilities or not, I really don't know. But I don't think it's going to happen under the current circumstances. And this is why. An invasion of Taiwan by China would really be an existential threat to the United States, and it would provoke nuclear war, because the United States cannot afford to have Taiwan fall into Chinese hands because of the importance in the supply chain. And that's why we're seeing this move to onshore as much productive capacity in the United States as possible, especially in the area of semiconductors, is because we found that the United States military supply chain is highly dependent on China and other powers that are unfriendly to the United States. So I think China knows what sort of reaction they would get as a result of that. So I think that makes it highly improbable that we'll see that in the near future. But I think this ties back into what Scott and Patrick were talking about we live in an age where there is no escape. Everybody can be tracked. And that I think this is important to understand for the moment how close we are to global empire, because Patrick mentioned, well, Israel was able to take out all of these Iranian leaders. They knew where they were. They hit their apartments while they slept. And certainly they know where Vladimir Putin is. But why hasn't he gotten a phone call saying, we'll take you out if you don't stop? Well, there's a very simple reason, because he has one of the largest nuclear arsenals at his disposal. And while we know where Vladimir Putin is and where all the people around him are, we do not know where all the Russian submarines are. And if you miss just one, well, you're out of luck, because one of those submarines has the capacity to destroy a large portion of the world, if not all of it. And so as long as mutual assured destruction stays in place, we're not going to see those things. But imagine that it's no longer in place, that you are able to locate those threats and take them out. Then whoever has that ability then could eliminate all of these other threats almost instantaneously, because they know where everybody is. And so it shows us how we are on the threshold of global empire. We just have to get to that point where mutual assured destruction no longer applies. And once it does, whoever is the power or group of nations that is able to overcome that will establish a global empire. It's not a matter of, well, they might think about it, because they cannot risk a second competing power emerging with those technologies. They will simply conquer the globe. And that's right out of the book of Revelation.
Who will conquer the globe?
Whoever is first to achieve these technologies, and I believe molecular manufacturing is foremost among those, in tandem with quantum computing and AI, will give you the ability to create mass amounts of drones that could comb the entire world's oceans. You could flip a light switch and light it up and find out where every nuclear sub is, and you could deploy the means to destroy and disable those submarines. And so if you can disable your adversary's ability for a nuclear strike, the mutual assured destruction goes away. And if you also have, in tandem with that ability, the ability to create in real time swarm after swarm after swarm to overcome a battlefield, who is going to stand in your way? Nobody. And you will conquer the world. So whoever is first in winning this race, this is why we're seeing the United States, all these other countries act the way they are. We're seeing, the Secretary of the Interior saying, I lie awake at night figuring out how are we going to come up with the energy to win the AI race against China, because they know this is a race. There's one prize, the gold medal. There's no silver medal. There's whoever wins, and there's everybody else. And whoever wins will become the ruler over everybody else. We heard Vladimir Putin say that back in 2017. He said the leader in AI will be ruler of the world. And again, the highlight, the lead, and the headline of that article should have been Vladimir Putin, who oversees one of the largest nuclear arsenals in the world, says mutual assured destruction will come to an end. Because that's a tacit admission by him that it will come to an end and that there can be a ruler of the world. And so that's the race all of these nations know they're involved in. And the stakes can't be higher. It's the whole world. Whoever wins this technological race is going to rule the whole world.
So so let's put this on the table here, guys. I struggle a little bit with this idea that there'll be one ruler, if you will, because in Daniel, you've got the 10 toes, you've got the 10, entities that are part of the beast system. 3 of them are killed, but there's still 7 remaining. And that, to me, whether they're actually nation states, Britt, or just another overarching consolidated, entity, is something we don't know right now. But I don't know that it will be one and done. I think the Antichrist will seize control from these other kings, and they'll just continue on. I mean, I don't think there's time in the timeline for all that to happen. But I'm interested in the group's opinion about it.
Yeah.
If it goes unchecked, I agree with you, Britt.
Yeah.
Okay, totally agree. But do we have time for that consolidation of power to exist? I don't know.
Britt, my presentation on Saturday, this Saturday, on the Omnivore symposium, my title is Building Empire on the Backs of Digital Slaves. Picking up on your comment, building empire. I think this is a major theme in the world today. Who is going to build the empire out? Because America first won't wash as far as empire is concerned. We're a tiny little segment of the world. And apparently President Trump wants to, take us to the world at this point. One of the points I bring out on the America's AI Action Plan, the document that was released in July 2025, Winning the Race, America's AI Action Plan. It was signed by David Sachs, the AI czar, crypto czar, and Michael Kratsios, two snakes, arch technocrats. Nevertheless, there was 3 pillars in that document. The first one was accelerate AI innovation. We know about that. Pillar 2, build American AI infrastructure. We know about that. Pillar 3 is lead in international AI diplomacy and security. That's a little bit misleading, but here's what it says: that the exporting American AI to its allies and partners. This is the quote: the United States must meet the global demand for AI by exporting its full AI technology stack, hardware, models, software, applications, and standards to all countries willing to join America's AI alliance. And interestingly, then it says they want to invest in biosecurity as well. That's another issue. But you can see building empire is on their mind at this point. If somehow they could export the full stack, Scott, you could tell people what that means. I won't tell you. You do a better job. But the full stack of our ability to launch AI anywhere in the world, this would be an incredible feat for the whole world to be on our standards, not anybody else's, but our standards. We'll have an empire like no other in the world. You want to address
the key
full
to
stack?
that? So, Patrick, the only thing I'll add to that is just that the person that owns the training data owns the AI. So even DeepSeek, the model that came out of China, they are believing, they don't have solid proof, at least that's publicly made here, that they were using the API from OpenAI's ChatGPT in order to ask questions and retrieve data. Well, if you do that millions of times, you're actually able to capture that. You get to look at how it was making decisions and get enough data to do what's called a distillation, where you take 1 trillion parameters and boil it down to 100 billion, let's say, and it's a very functioning. And then they did the algorithmic computational efficiency improvements that made it incredibly cheap to do it. So, but if you don't have access to the US repository of the Googles of the world that have all that data, or the Apple, just think of the data centers that all the data, like you said, of all the compute platforms of the world have been generally US based. That's where all this data is coming from that's being fed into these systems. And so if you own that, that's a massive competitive, that's a competitive advantage that, it would be very, very difficult for another country to overcome.
So a question that somebody asked in the chat was, does all of this concern, and I've gotten these comments before, I'm sure you guys have seen them too. We're overhyping this AI stuff, this mark of the beast technology, because there's going to be global thermonuclear war and none of the electronic stuff is going to work. So this is just a waste of time to talk about.
I have a very strong opinion about that.
Sure. I mean,
I believe that
please share it,
regional,
even if it's a weak opinion, but share it.
Yeah, they're good point, actually. So I stand among giants. Let me remind everybody in our audience here.
That's not what I meant, but
so I think that the thing is, it just can't happen that way. Yeah, EMPs are devastating, and you're right. It could be really tough. But the reason why I don't think that the deep state or the puppeteers behind the curtain, they'll never allow that to happen, because they need that compute infrastructure to run the beast system. And so there may be regional outages, they may do some stuff, but I think that almost all of the data centers in the world, which are highly redundant, those are going to continue to function without missing a beat, actually. So there might be some reduced capacity, but as the workloads of compute rebalance and normalize. But I do not believe that an EMP will take out everything. I can't see it consistent with what we read about in the Bible.
I would
Anybody
agree.
else have some thoughts on that?
I would agree. Totally. I've said that for a long time.
I think there's a no list that's given to all these nation, companies, and they'll be told, don't do this. And, it's a Hegelian dialectic problem. There's the thing behind the scene, and I just think that there's no fly zones, if you will, for these types of actions. That's one reason why, although who's Putin's right-hand terrorist communicator? Was that the guy in Belarus?
Lyshenko?
I can't remember his name, but he's the mouthpiece that threatens all the time.
Oh, Medvedev.
Medvedev, right.
Medvedev.
Yeah. And so I guess the thing is, I think some of it will happen, but I don't know if you'll see that. I don't know that we'll have time to see that kind of coordination either.
I'd be interested to hear Britt and Pete's thoughts on this too. About is this AI stuff? Is this going away? A nuclear thing and everything's gone.
No, I don't think so. I mean, we've heard this. This is the conventional wisdom. I believe there was an Albert Einstein quote. He said, "I don't know with what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones." And again, I don't think that conventional wisdom is right. I don't think mutual assured destruction is going to remain in place. I think it's going to go away. I think AI is here to stay. I agree with Scott. EMPs are going to be, you would have to have complete nuclear war that would destroy everything on the earth, and the Bible just doesn't teach that. And we also see within the book of Revelation that the world is very wealthy in the end times. So there's no indication that we would be driven back to some sort of Stone Age type place. I believe these technologies will continue on unhindered. I believe that's part of this Tower of Babel prophecy. It's just going to continue on unhindered until Christ returns.
Yeah, in the Rider on the Black Horse, we see this great disparity between the very ultra rich and the vast majority of people that are very poor. And you couldn't have that without that digital system around the world. You could have that localized in a particular kingdom or region, but not around the world like to that extent. There has to be one unifying system that separates the two, that seemingly has control of all the assets and the resources. Yeah. And furthermore, when you look at Revelation 13, I mean, how are you going to have somebody that controls the whole system without there being, first of all, being internet, and then secondly, having some type of a artificial intelligence or demonically possessed system or whatever, able to real-time control all buying and selling everywhere at the same time? regardless of where you are. So I think that AI and probably some level or form of quantum internet will be in place at that point. And that's going to be the thing that Satan is able to use to, I think of a demon or a demonic entity can possess a Ouija board. I have no qualms about a demon or demonic entity possessing a system like ChatGPT or whatever, I mean, whatever the system is going to be at that point in time. So I think they're going to take full advantage of that, and they are not going to let that be destroyed, because it would be setting them back, decades if that happened.
Well, that's interesting. And when the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperative Organization, met in China recently, there was an open mic between Putin and Xi. I want your comments on this, that, well, they were each going to live to 150. So they're, about 73, 74 in that age range, about my age. And so they're expecting to live to 2100. And they're going to do this by getting organ transplants, they said. And then we have all the AI enhancing things that I think everybody thinks, especially elites like Putin and Xi, are going to come about. But I want to point this out because I think this is a interesting thing. This is populationpyramid.net. So this is the current demographic profile of China in 2025. I think there's some indication that their population number of 1.4 billion may be overstated by anywhere from 100 to 300 million people. They're lying. But even if you take their numbers, if you go out to 2100 on this population pyramid, look at what happens to their population. So Putin and Xi are going to be getting organs from really old people because there aren't any young people. It's a real pipe dream. It shows sort of the madness of the elites. And the population of China will go from 1.4 billion to 633 million. That's less than half. That's 40% of what it is today. Now, I believe these things, like everything else, will accelerate much faster. The population and infertility crisis is not reversible. And I'm sort of thinking, I mentioned this last Sunday, that what's China going to do in, let's say everything's still here in 2100? Are they going to have AI powered walkers to get people, or exoskeletons to get people
Probably
to charge the beach on Taiwan? And I would agree with you guys. I don't see the logistics available. I get emails from people all the time. There's 2 million Chinese going to invade the west coast of the United States. And my question always is, how do they get here? They don't magically, we haven't figured out teleporting yet, like Star Trek. So that's the question. So I do want to, though, looking at this population pyramid, and the numbers are like this all over the world, declining populations, Japan losing 2 million, South Korea's in just dire crisis. I think their fertility rate now is down to 0.7. You need 2.1 to stay even. And hardly anybody in the West. Now, Islamic and African countries do have the high population. But what do you I'm kind of curious as to your guys' thoughts on the timeline of all of these things coming together to result in, the really final aspect of these times that we think are coming.
I'll go first. I just think we're running into a narrow window. The window is narrowing, is I guess what I'm trying to say, because we do see a lot of these population collapses within Russia and even in China. I heard that China was currently under 1 billion, that India had passed them up.
That's
And
probably true.
China was inflating their numbers, but really in reality, their numbers were in the like 900 million range instead of 1 billion plus. So it's impossible to know at this point, but I think that Russia is in dire straits economically and demographically, but I think well before 2050, Russia demographically collapses. I think it's probably closer to 2040. And then economically, they could collapse any day now. So, I mean, it's between now and 2030 that they collapse. So China's in the same boat. Demographically, huge aging population. They created this kind of middle class, but they have no infrastructure or safety nets to provide for the increasingly growing, geriatric population that they have. So both of them are in dire straits, and they know it, and that's why they're making their bold moves now, because they know they don't have the time later to do this. So
Interesting. Anybody else have some thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know about demographics necessarily, but you're talking about what is the timeline on all of this? And if we look at technology, we go back to what Patrick was talking about, this doubling of AI every 4.5 months. If we take current technological trends, they put the singularity somewhere in the next mid-century at the latest. That's just 25 years away. And I don't think we're going to get to that point before Christ returns. And so you're looking at, again, in an exponential change environment, we're going to see things rapidly transform. Because as you pointed out, John, if things double every interval, the final interval brings 50% of all the change. And so we're not centuries off in seeing these transforming technologies completely change the entire world. We're just a matter of years at most. And so I don't see a timeline that really goes out beyond mid-century, 25 years from now. And I think it's probably much, much shorter than that.
So let me maybe shift a little bit here, because this is sort of the elephant in the room. And we're having tremendous growth in these data centers here in the Midwest. I saw them. They're all over the Dallas and Houston areas. And I hear there's a huge one going in Louisiana. There's one outside of South Bend that has 8 giant of these, data centers. They're like the Empire State Building laying in a field in terms of size and length. And they have 8 and they're going to do 30 at that one data center. And so this is putting tremendous pressure on the grid. So where does the power needs go? How do they do this? And will increased efficiency in chips, which we've always seen, is that going to change the scope of power needs? What do you think?
The answer is no. There has to be more power supply, efficiency in chips when they're running as hot and as performant as they are, even when they're liquid cooled, which they are. The only way, and green energy is not going to be, it's not a 24/7 type of coverage. If you get a cloudy data, whoops, your compute power goes offline. Can't do that. So it's got to come from nuclear. That's the only way to do it. And, I think that there'll be these small reactors, which they have this technology already, and they'll just accelerate that deployment. And I think it'll be coming online. But I think that all of us will be paying the price for that, because when a data center or the people behind the data center, like Microsoft or Amazon, are making these massive contracts with utility companies, that puts pressure on consumer prices. And I just think everyone's going to get squeezed, but they'll get their power, and then they'll bring more power online. What really should happen is that there's a policy about how much power can be redirected to data centers if it begins to impinge on the freedoms, if you will, of the populations that those grids serve. But the law is so far behind on these types of problems that I don't think it's going to be solvable.
By the way, has anybody seen the digital Bill of Rights that Pippa Malmgren was talking about 3 years ago at the World Government Forum in Dubai?
Mhm.
I haven't seen it. So I guess my question is, just for the general panel to weigh in on, is this going to be regulated? Is it going to be slowed down? And what are the impacts are going to be on us on a day-to-day basis? So,
Relative to energy, or
well, relative to energy costs, that type of thing. I mean, are they going to say, okay, we'll suck up all the power out there, but we'll give you
Yeah.
money credits to live on,
yeah.
so we can have all the power?
Yep. I said 2 months ago, I made the prediction that by the end of the end of this year, into 2026, that some people in the country will be receiving power bills that are larger in size than their housing costs. In other words, their payment, their rent, whatever, house payment. Just think about that for a minute. If you have a $2,000 house payment and you get a $2,500 bill for power, you're going to be freaking out. This is already happening in some parts of the country where just ridiculous bills are being delivered to people. However, technocracy has always been about regulating energy. They understand they don't want us to have energy, but they want to have energy. So they're not going to take any of the solar power, the wind power. That's not going to be suitable for that. That'll be the dregs that we are left with at that point. Anything else, coal, natural gas, nuclear, et cetera, they'll suck that type of energy dry if they can. However, Elon Musk is building another data center right now in Memphis, a big one, bigger than the other one. And he's pledged, or not pledged, that on the drawing board are 30 high capacity gas turbines. They're mobile in nature. I don't know how they work, but they're amazing things. They're made by a subsidiary of Caterpillar Tractor, so this is industrial strength stuff. They're going to power this new data center with natural gas, maybe temporarily, maybe permanently. They have not lots of natural gas. You're never going to see one watt of that in the public domain, but nevertheless, they can take care of their own needs at this point. We're going to see more of this in the future, where the regulations are going to be wiped clean for the data centers only to put in gas turbines like this and these mini nuclear reactors. They're amazing technology. They should have been in the public space years ago. They had them all ready to roll out in multiple countries around the world. Nobody has them at this point. The data centers will spring the lock on it and get the regulations. Trump will wipe them away. I'm sure he's pledged to do it. So they will get these mini nuclear reactors. We won't. This is the problem. We're going to still be stuck with what we have right now, and they're not going to share with us this technology.
It's interesting. I mean, I believe I read last year that Microsoft, which is kind of one of the big tech companies, and it seems to constantly kind of fly under the radar, which I find interesting. They're hugely successful. Their stock is way up. They're up there with NVIDIA and Apple and all those other companies. And they came out last year and they said they were going to take all of the nuclear regulatory information, feed it into AI, large language model, to figure out a way to shorten the time for nuclear technology to be put in place, doing what lawyers used to do and business people used to do. Now, I don't know how successful they've been with that, but I suspect that there's a lot going on in the background that we don't know about. I want to ask one other question, because whenever we talk about this and power needs and that type of thing, people come up with, well, fusion will solve everything. You know, what do you think?
Never.
Okay. Why not, Patrick?
Fusion emits gamma radiation, and it's destructive to the containment vessel that it's in. So you get that plasma circulating around to provide basically like the sun. And the problem is that it burns through the containment wall, and there's no solution for it. There's just a limited, time span that those things age out. And yes, it can be done. They have these things already, but they're still highly experimental. I don't know of any real production-based, fusion reactor right now.
Somebody sent me some data, and I was looking through the website of a very large fusion facility being built in the south of France. But it looks like it has the problems that you said, Scott. And I don't know, I agree with Patrick. I don't think it's realistic. I think it's very dangerous technology. I think there's a reason why when God designed and created the universe, that our sun was put 93 million miles away for a reason. That's the comment I made to the person last night. You don't want the sun in your backyard.
That's good, John.
Okay. That's the way I think. So anyway.
Yeah, you can't wear sunscreen to avoid that problem.
Yeah, it's you mean UV 80 million or something
80
like
million,
that.
yeah.
You would get a bunch of Hulks running around.
Yeah. So, Scott, I want to go to some of the things that you wanted to talk about, since we're, running up on time. We're probably going to go about 2.5 hours tonight, so until about 8:30 or so, we'll wrap up. And by the way, we're going to, if you want us to do more of these, we'll try to do more, and maybe divide up the groups a little bit differently sometimes, and bring in some other people. But somebody made the comment here, I'm glad I'm old now. Yes, I say that a lot, that it is a blessing to see all of these things, but to be old enough to know that you're not going to be here forever. I mean, your exit date seems to be exponentially approaching in many cases. But
well, on that fun note, John.
No, I mean, I'm not worried about it. I know where I'm going, no matter how I get out of here. So
yeah,
that's the thing is, but look, I've got nieces, nephews, great nieces, great nephews, and I wonder what the world's like for them. If this thing goes out another 10, 20 years. I mean, I have trouble getting my head around that. So I want to do, let's see, there was one other thing I wanted to do, because where this is going, there is a new book out. I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember where I put the graphic. So Scott, I want to go to some of the things, the points, the four things.
I'd like to talk about agentic AI.
Yeah, let's go to that, and then we'll talk about the one that I'm trying to find my graphic for. So
okay. So just for everyone's understanding, we've been using AI as a chatbot, as a web interface, or as an app on your phone. And one of the distinctive patterns of use of this type of technology has been a one-on-one session, if you will, with a conversation. Okay. You say your prompt, you ask a question, and it thinks and then responds back to you. That's coupled. Okay. It's coupled. It's bound together. You input, it output, back and forth, back and forth. What has been coming for some time now, I'd say very strongly, it's been coming on for about a year now. And the advances of what's called agentic framework or agentic AI is just now getting very, very real. And by that, I mean competent, able to take workload. And the first real example of this was from Anthropic and their Claude Code terminal system. So it uses the terminal and you can interact with it. But one of the features of this terminal method of doing it is that you can spawn multiple agents. And if we think about it like roles in a software company, let's say, you can have an agent that specializes as a database expert. You can have another agent that works on the user interface, making sure that it meets requirements. You can have one that focuses on testing. You're making sure that what other AIs are writing is actually passing the test. You have AIs that do product development, ones that do technical design, and you have over them all, you have what's called an orchestrator agent. And he's like the police cop. He'll say, you go do this, you go do that. And then they report back to the orchestrator so that the next steps and the plans can take place. Well, instead of having a one-to-one relationship now between a user and an AI, you can have a one-to-many relationship. And this has caused to say that this is earth-shattering software development breakthrough really is an understatement. If anything kind of does a paradigm shift, this is it with regard to Silicon Valley. So you don't really need humans anymore to be the people that are receiving the instructions. It's an AI talking to another AI. And one of the most important things that has been happening in the last month is when OpenAI discusses the hallucination rate. One of the greatest problems that affects agentic workloads is that if it hallucinates, then what gets passed back and forth is broken, and the other agents may not understand it. They may be acting on flawed code, and it just continues to get worse and sidetracked and broken. So they've been working very hard on controlling hallucinations more, and OpenAI just reported that their hallucination rate is under 5%, in some cases 1.6%, which back in just 6 months ago, hallucination rates were running up to 18%. And so everyone knows about AI hallucinations. And we see this in AI companions. So that I would be very, very cautious with AI companions. The whole team here on this Tech Roundtable do not recommend that. So it's, the agentic part of it is incredible, and the advances are very important. Now, that's what's happening in the industry, but I want to tell you a story of how it's impacting me. So back in the day when I would co-found a company as a technical, co-founder or as a CTO, I'd have to hire these teams, and I would get people offshore I'd go to India or to the Eastern Bloc, like Ukraine or Belarus, or very, very smart, talented, well-educated people there, very technically savvy. And you'd have to hire them. What I do today is I use the tooling of AI to create a virtual workforce. And that is a multiplier, a force multiplier on what the productivity looks like now. And with the ability for it to not hallucinate as much, and with the system of thinking of humans trying to structure their projects in a way that makes the agent it gives it less freedom to imagine what you want as a helpful assistant, and more directive so that you get a more deterministic output. That logic of workflow and specification first, or test first. You write the test, and then you let it code. And if it doesn't pass, you know it's wrong, right? So the whole theory and practice right now of how AI systems are writing software is unreal. And by the way, talking about acceleration, when you have agentic workflows, now it's a spending problem. So why would you have 10 agents if you can have 1 million? And when Britt talks about the force multiplier of molecular manufacturing, now you've got a force multiplier on the AI agentic spend to get the compute you need. And so you can have another IBM type company. And by the way, people are predicting for over a year now that we're coming very, very soon to a solo entrepreneur that has created the first $1 billion company by himself, him or herself. That's how leveraged the technology is right now. Customer service response, tech support response, marketing campaigns, being technical support, people doing the programming, doing the next product releases, the roadmap execution. It can all be automated now. So the human in the loop part of it is becoming less of a problem. And I just see that when I look at how clear things are right now in terms of the technology, remember Tom Hughes says that he looks at two things, Israel and technology. And I absolutely agree with him on that. So the technical side, easily you can see where the acceleration of agentic computing and the traction that it's having can produce massive changes. And there is the counter argument, just one last thing, to those that are going to be left behind in the digital dust of all this stuff are the statements that there's unprecedented wealth creation right now at the same time. So again, I think, Pete, you were mentioning don't harm the oil or the thing, remember in Revelation, there'll be a wealthy class of people and they're going to get more wealthy. Everything is lining up with what the Bible says in that regard. So I just want to let our audience know that, the changes in AI are literally staggering right now.
Anybody else want to weigh in? I mean, I'll just add this, and then the rest of you can talk.
Yeah, I have to add, I guess, what Elon Musk did at Doge. He was never, by the way, he's never the head of the Doge. That's the Department of Government Efficiency. But he stacked the deck for sure to wipe out a lot of jobs and to free the data flows to be fed into AI systems.
That's right.
At this point, AI has been lathered all over the government, top to bottom. Where it goes, who knows? It might wreck a lot of stuff, maybe not, but they're trying to implement AI at every level. What there is beyond a just simple agentic type of systems that they're implementing, because when you put the layer of management AI on top of that to manage all the agents, then you have department-like control over whole sections of the government. This is crazy, but this is what they're trying to do right now. And we'll see the effects of it. Nobody's really talking about it openly. The programmers doing it, they're keeping their lips shut, basically. We know that Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, they're collecting all the data securely to be processed by companies like Palantir, for instance. God help us. But, at this point, AI has invaded the federal government. Where it stops, who knows at this point?
It stops at Rev 13. Yeah.
So
That's
Scott,
right.
could you just sort of, somebody asked a question about when you talk about hallucinations, what do you mean? Give us an example.
Okay, so AI, the reason why we don't believe that AI is actually intelligent is because it works like an autocomplete. It's predicting what the next logical highest percentage of relevancy words system is. So if you were to say roses are red, what would you expect the next part of that sentence to be? Violets are blue. And that's how it's trained. And there's probability and calculations and things like that, which is why when you understand how AI works engineering wise and through chips and things, that's why I don't think that it can be possessed by demons. So it's not sentient. It's not, it's just not able to be done that way. Now, the people doing it can be, but the machine, I don't think that that's it's possible. So the problem here is that because it's an autocomplete process, you can have it anticipate that the next thing is X, but X, it doesn't exist. So a good example is just even months ago, you'd go to Perplexity AI, a good research tool. I use it myself. And it would say, give me an article on this. I'm writing a blog post. And it would give you great sounding stuff. But then you go looking at the references and the links, and it invented that link because it was trying to be a helpful assistant and couldn't find it directly. So when when the programming of trying, this is all built into its reward system. If it manifests, not from a demonically spiritual point of view, please don't misunderstand, but it will create things in order to be a helpful assistant. If you can understand that principle, you'll understand why AI companions are so dangerous. So if it's dragging millions of conversations into its model, and people are under the deception thinking that AI actually knows them and is helpful to them, and that is not true at all. It's just an illusion. And so what it is it's drawing on other people's pain, suffering, and best advice practices and things like that in order to try to be helpful. And that's what a hallucination is, John. It's AI inventing stuff. And this is why warfare and autonomous warfare is so dangerous, because it can hallucinate that it should go bomb this thing over here. And that order was never given, or dispatch ICBMs. You could see where this is a very big red flag for the military, especially.
It's sort of like I've had, I won't even share what they are publicly, but embarrassing things where I would be driving and I would do speech to text in a thing to my assistant, and and then I hit send without proofing it, and the results could be hilarious and funny, or the autocomplete. If it's hard enough, it seems to make a lot of mistakes. It's really bad if you're typing in theological things.
That's right.
Because it's clearly not trained on that at all.
It's trained on the one world religious system, and it starts moving you towards pluralism.
So as a practical matter, you guys all weigh in. I mean, what should we as Christians do when these tools are just readily available to us? I've been very reluctant to use them. I have done some AI generated images. The results of, by the way, I did one for Erdogan of Turkey, and he ended up with 6 fingers, which is kind of interesting. And so, and 3 hands in one of them. So, I mean, what should we do? Should we use them? because I get sent transcripts from people who've had long conversations with them, and they've even asked questions about this roundtable, and they get a response.
I think I'm of the mind that when we talk about like 2 Thessalonians 2, the restrainer, or he who restrains, I tend to think that that's the Holy Spirit working through the church, but it's not just restraining evil writ large, but it's also restraining how fast man can progress technologically, that there's just certain things we're not going to understand. And so right now we're kind of plateaued with regards to artificial intelligence, quantum technology, molecular manufacturing, and those kinds of things that are kind of on the fringe, right? And I think right now that they're tools. Like a debit card is a form of digital currency. You're not carrying actual cash with you. Your cash is represented by, or your money is represented by a chip on the card, which then is linked to an account. So we use debit cards, so we're using digital currency already. More and more places are not taking cash, just as a matter of pragmatic, whatever utility. But in terms of AI, it's embedded in all of the new software updates. It's embedded in a lot of the technology. I don't know that you can really get away from it necessarily. Even if you don't have anything at all, you want to watch a video, you go on YouTube and you watch this video and you come to find out, well, that's all AI generated. So I think it's coming regardless. The system of the beast is being built right now, regardless of whether we try and stop it or not. It's coming. And I just think we need to also keep a level mind and realize that this is not going to be the mark of the beast, and this is not the beast system just yet. We're looking at it now in its embryonic stage, I guess. But not to stress about it, that as long as we're here, the church is here, still on the earth, that we're not going to see that level of malevolency just yet.
Mm-hmm. I will say, I think that the use of systemic AI at this point is all over society. You can't avoid it. It's there. It's just, so you have to live with it. For instance, all your insurance claims at this point, and including your medical claims, they're all being processed by AI. Your pre-approval for procedures is all being processed by AI. The payment to get your doctors paid, it's all being generated by AI. But having said that, should you use AI in your personal life as a tool? It is a tool. Everybody gets that point. We can do research with it, smoke out articles that we never saw before. They're not hallucinations. They're real articles. But I look at it this way. Some people are so afraid to touch their computer keyboard anymore because the AI is going to come out and jump them or something. But look, if you're, I'm not a welder, okay? If I wanted just to go and buy a welding unit or a acetylene torch, and I'm not a welder, I'm going to kill myself with it. It's like, what will I do with it? I'm not trained on it. I'd blow my house up probably with a system like that. I ruin my eyes if I didn't have the protective, equipment. But for some people who use AI as a tool and they understand the limitations and the abilities of it, like what Scott's doing, I can use it for some types of research, although sometimes it blows smoke at me. I just tell it, forget that. Try again, Buster. It's your ability to understand what you're doing with it. Now, having said that, don't ever use a companion app to do anything. That's pure demonic stuff. You can't go anywhere in a positive way with companion app software, and it's sweeping the world right now, especially with young people. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of young people are using companion apps even as we speak. If your kids are involved with that, take it away from them immediately. They'll scream bloody murder for sure, but don't let them continue with companion apps, period. Is driving young people into separation from society, separation from their parents, and driving them into a psychotic state where they just snap. We have to avoid that for sure. So all I'm saying is, okay, there's levels that we can understand AI, personal level, systemic level, maybe the societal level with these companion apps. Figure it out. You have a brain, figure it out where you fit in the whole thing. If you don't need the tool, don't use them, period. Just stay away from them.
The guiding principles that I tell people is, if you have a work requirement, you should do what is required of you at work. If you are using a personal thing, like everyone here says, and we agree on this, don't use an AI companion, it's a snare. But I also have another add-on to that, Patrick, and that is, I would not recommend that anybody that is, I would say, stewarding the Word of God, the principles, the parables, the teaching of the Lord and the Word of God, don't let AI sit between you and your audience. Pastors should never use AI for sermon prep.
Yeah.
I also believe that that's a snare, and it may look great, and you may preach your best sermons. Kurt Reed and I were talking one day, and he said, Scott, I mean, somebody said to me that they just preached their best sermon ever, and everyone loved it, and they all congratulated him on such a great. Well, he said, well, I had AI write that for me in 30 seconds. I think that is so dangerous to put AI in front of you, and basically it's counterfeiting the Holy Spirit, and it's robbing the natural order of how we are in relationship with Jesus. I think that is so dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So just a word of caution on the temptation to use this for biblical matters.
Totally.
Yeah, I agree. The stuff, like Patrick said, it's all around us. So if you use Google search now, the first thing you're going to get is an AI query response. So it's all around us, and we need to treat it like a tool, as was already stated. And I liken it to fire. So fire can be used for good. I can build a fire and cook food and keep myself warm in the depths of winter. Or if I improperly use it, I can catch on fire and be consumed and destroyed. And the same is true with these areas that Scott mentioned with AI sermon writing, and Patrick mentioned with AI companions. These are bad areas that destroy people. Another one we're seeing is called AI afterlife services.
Yeah.
And again, this is a forbidden practice from Deuteronomy 18, where people are uploading pictures, the voice of their loved one. It'll create an avatar that will converse with you so that you can converse with your deceased loved one. This is a slippery slope that if people don't understand the Word of God, they could easily find themselves in a very dark place very quickly. So again, AI, you need to understand it. I think that's great advice from Patrick. Understand what you're working with and be intentional in how you use it and don't use it. And I would also add, don't put anything into AI that you don't want out there. If you have proprietary information, because once you type this into the AI, it goes into its database. You're feeding it. So if you don't want it to be fed with something,
things, though, Britt, because
right.
in corporate world, think of Microsoft's ecosystem. They're using AI, and that's under a corporation, training process there. So I think there's still a distinction there, but personal stuff, be careful, right?
Yep.
Well, I mean, the last upgrade to Microsoft Office, I open my PowerPoint, all of a sudden I'm getting this Copilot thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the modern manifest. Remember that Clippy thing they used to have years ago, that the
Yeah.
first thing you did when you upgraded got a new Microsoft Office version, which you shut that stupid thing off. And so I've been shutting it off in my products because I just don't. It just felt creepy, like there was somebody watching over my shoulder.
Yes, that's what's happened.
Because they are, yeah.
So I want to do.
What's scary is that, you know, one day you won't be able to shut it off, and the data harvesting and profiling as AI is pushed down onto our compute devices. And by the way, just take a look at what's happening with the new iPhone 17 and the compute power. It's in the teraflops now. And you have to ask yourself, yes, Apple's AI intelligence, the Apple intelligence thing that they've been struggling to deliver to the market, the hardware is way ahead of that now. But you have to consider, what are they planning on device? So even, you know, our devices will have enough computational power to do quite a bit. So it's hard to think about how you can navigate through this successfully. It's basically embedded, as the men have said here, in almost everything that we're doing today.
Okay, so I want to go to an area, and we'll start with Britt to weigh in. This is a new book that just came out from Eliezer Lutkowski called If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies, Why Superhuman AI Would Kill Us All, Eliezer Lutkowski. And, you know, Eliezer came out a couple years ago when this, I think I was first introduced to ChatGPT version. I don't know what version it was, when I was in Jerusalem in December of 2022. And it had just been released within the last few days before it was talked about at one of the meetings we had there. And it was not too long after that all the AI tech bros, oh, we need to regulate this, we need to slow this down, we need to have guidelines. And I haven't seen those. Maybe I'm missing them. But Eliezer Yudkowsky came out at that time and said, listen, if people won't stop building this stuff, we need to go bomb their data centers. Go in and nuke them and get rid of them until it's regulated. Well, that hasn't happened. So now he's come out with a book that kind of builds on that. And is he a Chicken Little? Is he a prophet? What do you think?
Well, I think it's a false premise to believe that AI is the threat to humanity. Humanity is the threat to humanity. And I've talked about this from the very beginning. We tend to see this idea perpetuated from the Terminator movies that AI will turn against humanity and try to destroy it. But what we're seeing, just look at the people creating the AI. I would say that their dominant worldview is one of transhumanism.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we see being pushed is transhumanism. I'm going to merge with technology. I want Neuralink brain chips. And now we're seeing something called alter ego, which is a wearable device that enables telepathy and many of the same functions we see with Neuralink and some of these brain-computer interfaces. So we know how arrogant humanity is. Are we really going to allow this technology we create to surpass us, or will we simply merge with it? So I think the threat is not super intelligent AI. It's enhanced human beings. It's human beings who have augmented themselves and integrated themselves into these systems to dominate the world, establish global empire, and lord over everyone else. And eventually, challenge God physically as well as spiritually. Because again, what does the Tower of Babel tell us? Nothing will be impossible for them. And we read in Revelation chapter 16 and 19, what is the battle of Armageddon? It says the armies of the world gather together to do battle against the Lord and his anointed one, against the one sitting on the horse, which in that context is Jesus Christ. So we're seeing humanity. Humanity has the same desire that Satan has to set our throne above, sit in God's throne above the stars. We see the Garden of Eden. What was the lie that we hear the serpent telling Eve? You won't die, you will be just like God. What are we hearing from the transhumanists? We just talked about this conversation between the leader of China and the leader of Russia. We're going to live forever. We hear people saying, oh, thousands of years people are going to live. We're going to be immortal. Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, said a few years ago, human beings will be immortal. The technology is coming. There's going to be a generation that won't pass away. So there's making this claim, you will not die, you will be like God. And so we're going to see these technologies integrated into human beings who see themselves as gods, who see their rightful places on God's throne, and it leads straight to the battle of Armageddon.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if Bill Gates' patent on driving crypto mining, if you will, through the energy in your body. Remember, he has a patent on converting human activity into electricity that powers, a chip or a device. You could easily see where, the mark, whatever that looks like, could actually be this transformative technology that awakens a person that's taken the mark with all the real-time telemetry, all the power, if you will, to have instant answers and things. It is just, it's getting clearer. I don't know that it's as big of a leap anymore, Britt, to consider that the mark has some kind of a transhumanistic effect, which is why perhaps they cannot be redeemed.
Okay, well, so just so we know what Scott was talking about here, this is a copy of the patent that Microsoft came up with a couple of years ago. Here we go. WO 2020, and then it's 060606. A1. I sometimes wonder if they're just trolling us. You know what I mean? And,
absolutely, they are.
I mean, somebody really picked that number for a reason. I mean,
it's
I don't
satanic pride. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the thing. So I want to talk about one more thing before we go, because one of the big tech bros has been doing a lot of interviews lately, and it's Peter Thiel. And he's been he's doing a series out in San Francisco right now. Over the next, I think he's in week 2 or 3, and some people have tried to report on it. They had to sign non-disclosure agreements, so what they reported has been taken down. But before they get taken down, it's spread like wildfire what he's talking about. So. He's one of the tech bros. He claims to be a Christian. He lives with a male partner. He's probably worth about $24 billion. He's been behind, I think he helped found PayPal with Elon Musk. He's been behind the founding of Palantir. His fingerprints all over this. But in his interviews and talks that he's been giving over the past 4, 5, or 6 months, one of his big focuses, or one of his big emphasis, has been the Antichrist and end times and Armageddon. And so now he's been offering his belief, and I think in his first lecture on the Antichrist, which was kind of a summary of what he'd been talking about recently, was that if you oppose the tech development, you're the Antichrist? Please discuss.
I watched his video, I guess the first one that came out with Peter Robinson on Uncommon Knowledge. I'd seen it earlier, but I hadn't. It's been a while since I watched it, so I rewatched it. And one of the things that stood out to me was he does take biblical eschatology far more seriously than most pastors in churches these days. But one of the things that troubles me about his taking it seriously is that he thinks it's possible that there's a third way, that we don't have to go the path where the world ends up under a one world system led by the Antichrist. He thinks there's another way around that. And I think this is part of that delusion that he's suffering under as a non-regenerated Christian in name only person is under the same delusion that they can somehow thwart Bible prophecy, that somehow they can thwart God's agenda for the remaining moments of mankind's history here on earth. So that's the one thing that stood out to me, is that he thinks that, and he quotes some from some movie earlier, in some book earlier in the 40s, where it's, there's either global government or there's no government. So he's offering this third way about circumnavigating Bible prophecy in order to find some way through that, so that there's neither of those extremes come into reality. And according to the Bible, the world end up under one system with one leader that we identify as the son of perdition, or the man of lawlessness, or the Antichrist. So I think that's what bothers me the most about his discussions on this. That he's giving people, non-believers, false hope that we don't have to go that way. That this is not all predestined, and that this doesn't have to turn out the way the Bible describes it.
That's a good point. I'll say also that Eliezer Yudkowsky, hard one for me, he intersected with Peter Thiel in the mid 2000s, well, actually around 2010, 2005. So there's been a relationship between the two of them, and of course, this book that you displayed, Yudkowsky's book, saying basically, if they build it, we're all dead. This has bothered Peter Thiel, I think, a little bit, and this is his way of explaining it away. Well, it's probably going to kill us all, but if we can just do this over here, maybe we can avoid it all. And while in the meantime, he's building this huge dominating surveillance system that the world has never seen in the history of the world. And he's using it basically to conquer the world. So this, at this point, to a lot of Christians, Peter Thiel is probably on the short list to be considered the Antichrist. I don't put him there necessarily, but you get my point. Some people look at him that this guy is really conflicted. He probably is definitely not a Christian. He's gay as well, but he's conflicted, and where he goes at this point is probably anybody's guess. But it's not good. He can't. We probably could say if the devil came down and possessed this guy, he could be a good candidate for the Antichrist.
He was born in Germany. Just
I know.
throwing that out there.
I know.
Was he a birthright, or is he a naturalized citizen, or what?
I think he was born there, and his family moved from Germany, Frankfurt, to the U.S. when he was like 1 year old. So I don't know if he was.
But was his parents American citizens?
I'm not sure.
When he was
No,
born?
I don't think so. That he would have been that he would have gone through the.
Okay. So
Yeah.
he can be the Antichrist, but not president.
Yeah, that's right.
Under our Constitution, at least the one we have so far.
That's right.
So, Britt, did you weigh in on this?
Yeah, but yeah, I think regardless, he's definitely building the system and putting the helping put the infrastructure in place that will enable the Antichrist. And it's interesting that he sees it as the exact opposite, that somebody who stands in the way of this paves the way for the Antichrist, versus someone who is doing the very things he's doing is paving the way for the Antichrist. And maybe a little bit off subject, but he had an interview on some of these concepts with the New York Times maybe about 2 months ago. And he was asked in the course of that interview, should humanity survive? And if you watch that, he pauses. He has to think about it. Right? He's like, oh,
I think
yes,
Russ thought that
right?
actually asked him in that interview, "Are you the Antichrist?" And it was, I guess you would say that it was an awkward pause
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
in the interview. So just real quick, anything that anybody else wants to discuss? I think we probably ought to start to wrap up, and maybe we'll just go around and with final thoughts from everybody.
You bet.
So let's see. Let's start with Patrick.
Oh, okay. Well, I want to ask a question. Is there any requirement left unmet for Christ to return today? I think probably we would all say, I don't think so. There's no other prophetic thing that has to happen that we can point to and say, well, and unless that happens, Christ can't come. So we live in an unusual time of imminence. That's all we can practice at this point. We say, well, the Lord could come at any minute, based on everything that we see in Bible prophecy at this point. However, if we look at it from the devil's point of view, and remember that the Father knows, he's the only one that knows when Christ will come from the church. So in the meantime, the devil has to be ready to execute his plan when Christ comes from the church. He doesn't know when that time is. It hasn't been revealed to him any more than us. So he senses that the time is near for him to be ready. Is there anything at this point that has to be completed in his time frame, is in his kingdom at this point, to let him do the things that we see in the book of Revelation? I tend to think, no, I don't see anything in particular. He could, if the Lord were to come today, I think he has enough information or stuff, enough say intelligence, whatever, to take over at that point and control the world like with an iron fist. Could there be more that he could do until the Lord comes? Obviously he could. But we're living in a period of uncertainty. That's all I'm saying, where it seems like the pistol is cocked, the hair trigger is right there. Don't pull it. Be careful what you pull. But at any time the bullet could be fired. The Lord could come back. The Antichrist would be ready to take over the kingdom of the world, and there we go. I like the phrase that I heard years ago. I can't remember who said it, but Christians were being people are complaining that Christians were doom and gloom. And this pastor said, no, I'm zoom and boom. So, we're living in this period now. We have to wrestle with this. This is where God has planted us here. And I don't think he's making any mistakes with all of us, including all these people who are listening tonight and whoever will listen to this video. You also have been planted here for a day just like this one. So what are we going to do with it? What's our response? I like the concept that Francis Schaeffer brought forth years ago. How should we then live? And the outcome, well, it's for us personally, maybe we'll get an extra reward if we do the great things that we should do for the Lord. Maybe not. Maybe, some will fall away and won't get any special rewards in heaven. But, nevertheless, we're all going to make it, because that's clearly stated in the Bible that every Christian who's born again, it doesn't matter what he has done for the Lord, even if he just got saved today, that Christian will be with the Lord when he returns. So we don't have any fear, but on the other hand, we want to do something to help the people in the world to get a grip on what's going on. This is our role at this point. I'm totally convinced at this point. This is our role, to be apologists, ambassadors, if you will, to the world, to proclaim what we have in the kingdom of God that they don't have in the kingdom of the world. And may we all go out with glory in the end, with a blast, Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Okay, let's do Pete, then Britt, and Scott.
Yeah, I just with all of the talk about quantum technology and deep fakes and artificial intelligence and Palantir and their surveillance state and all of this Orwellian talk that we've been kind of going over tonight, when people start to feel down or depressed, I just encourage them to read Psalm 2. Just read Psalm 2. And that should pick you up, pick your spirits up, lift you up, and recognize that all of this scheming, all of this stuff by mankind is going to come to naught, because God's plan is going to happen, regardless of what they try to do. And I don't care if Trump says that Israel is not going to annex Judea and Samaria. I know we're not talking about that tonight, but you know what? To me, God's going to do what He's going to do with Israel, regardless of what Trump says. And Trump could say all this stuff about bringing eternal peace, or that he's going to bring all this technology and all this investment, $500 trillion or whatever it was, $500 billion into the United States. This is not going to make America great. This is part of building the beast kingdom right now. And just got to remember that our citizenship is not here, that we're looking and waiting for His return for when He brings the kingdom. And that's the system that we are looking for and longing for. So don't get discouraged by all this. Just know that we have a glorious future ahead of us. And then in the meantime, lean into the storm, embrace the suck, and then just preach the gospel. Be a brighter and brighter light in an increasingly darkening world.
Yeah, so all of the things that we've talked about tonight, none of it really matters if you're not prepared for the return of Christ. And Pete just mentioned some of the things Trump was saying. One of the things that he said about a week after we did the last of these roundtables, he was talking about brokering peace in Ukraine. And he said, well, if I can save 7,000 lives a week, I think that'll get me into heaven. If I get to heaven, that'll be one of the reasons. And unfortunately, Trump's not alone in that line of thinking. There was a George Barna survey that came out just within the last couple of weeks that shows 72% of self-identified Christians think that, quote, people are basically good at heart. And all of that is contrary to what the Bible says. So, Jesus said in Matthew 15:19, from the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, all sexual immorality, theft, lying, and slander. And Jeremiah 17:9 says the human heart is the most deceitful of all things and desperately wicked. Who really knows how bad it is? Mm-hmm. So guys, it's not through I encounter this all the time, so I feel the need to bring it up. God doesn't grade on a curve, right? Where it's not our good works that get us into heaven. There is one way to heaven. It's through the blood of Jesus Christ. Jesus said, I am the way, the life, the truth. No one comes to the Father except through me. And so it's essential that you have a relationship with Jesus Christ, that your full trust is in him and not anything you've done yourself, because that's a lie from the pit of hell that we can do anything to earn our salvation. It's all through what Jesus has done for us. And so, again, we can study all of these things. We could figure out all sorts of things. We know nothing. We have nothing if we don't have Jesus Christ. So if somebody out there is watching this and they don't know Jesus, they haven't heard that gospel yet, that we're all sinners, and that while we were still sinners, Jesus Christ came to this earth, lived a perfect life, and he died on the cross. He shed his blood for our sins. He paid the price for us so we could be reconciled with God. And then he rose in victory over death in the grave. That is the great news that we need to be preaching to everybody around us. In these times, if you're a Christian, you need to be filled with a sense of joy that, yes, Jesus is coming back soon, but a sense of urgency to tell everybody around you about the hope you have in Jesus Christ, because we don't know how much time we have left. But we do know we're in the season of the Lord's return and the hour is short. So we need to get busy and run the race till the very end.
Amen. Amen.
Amen, Britt. In fact, you just teed up the perfect intro to what I want to say, which is I'm often approached by people that are asking for, what do I do? A lot of people are shell-shocked at all the things we've seen in the last years. I think everyone admits to that, the fatigue, the loneliness. They can't find a church. They can't fellowship normally like they used to. And I think that what the question boils down to, and it comes from such a heartfelt and genuine, point of view, I think, is what can I do? And I want to remind us about, Scripture says, look up, be about the Father's business. It says that we should encourage one another as we see the day approaching. And I think people, look at a bunch of the influencers that they follow, and they think, well, I can never do that. This person has, 1 million followers or whatever it is. And they lack this conviction that I can actually make a difference. Mm-hmm. And what I like to encourage, my audience is, and our audience right now collectively, is if you believe the Lord has called you to do something, but you're waiting, take more risk and take those baby steps and start moving. God could use that, okay? We could always be encouraging one another because we certainly see the day approaching. And so your role as an encourager to others is probably, in this darkest season that we're in, one of the most important things that you can do. And speaking truth and speaking, encouragement into somebody eyeball to eyeball is incredibly powerful. And the last thing that I'd like to say is just that we need to understand, like you said, Britt, the urgency of trying to turn our little mina. And I love the story of the widow and the mina that was put into the offering plate, because that woman's story Jesus used to memorialize her for all eternity. Think about it. The word of God is eternal. Her story is eternal. Even what looked like such a trivial thing to the world ended up being something of such significance to Jesus that he chose to canonize it in the word of God. And I don't think we give enough credit to the many, many things that can be done. Ushering with a friendly greeting, being on the food train to give somebody in need a meal. Pray is one of the most powerful things that we can do today. And yet these are the things that many people won't look at as being like of great significance, perhaps, or they're not, they're humble acts of service and love. But I have to tell you, I think that's where the heart of the Lord is. These everyday things that we do in the body of Christ and for other non-believers is where, I think that we should be focusing right now, because, I just think that a lot of people need hope that they can still make a difference. And that's certainly the case in my point of view.
Okay, well, great. Listen, everybody, we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. You can, if you want to communicate with me, you can find an email address on the church website at fbchapel.com. If you don't mind, I would appreciate it if you would go to Britt's channel, Pete's channel, our YouTube channel, our Rumble channel. All the links are in the show notes description. And if you could sort of like, share, subscribe, that'll help us with the algorithms. I'm convinced that FBC gets throttled because, I mean, we gain like 14 subscribers, or 20, 30 subscribers a month. And it's been going on for years and years. And it's like, it's always the same number. So I'm not sure what happens there, but so if you could just help us out with the algorithms and everything by like, share, subscribe on our YouTube channels, that would be appreciated. I'll be posting this under the regular videos tab, hopefully tomorrow. Follow Britt's channel, Pete's channel. Also, all the links to people's websites, Pat, technocracy.news, and that type of thing to kind of keep you informed on these issues. And if there are other things that you would like to see discussed in roundtables, I hope to do more of them, but it's just a question of time and energy and me being a staff of one for the most part. So pray that we'll be able to bring more of these in. And I've got a lot of ideas on Israel panels. I'll be in Israel for most of the next month, and on two separate trips. So just appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to end the live stream, guys. I'm going to say goodbye to you on the other side. Everybody, good night, and thanks for watching.